This question came, this topic comes up quite frequently, and I hear it a lot on the news. And so the question today is, what do I do if I disagree with my psychiatrist? Or I should say, bum bum bum. Yeah, that's more gravitas. So yeah, so here's the fun part, y'all. So I almost don't even know where to start to answer this question because it's such a good one. So let's start. First off, let's start off with what a psychiatrist is. So, like, a psychiatrist is a human being that went to school for a really long time to learn patterns of behavior, algorithms for treatment, and then they are scientists, and so they try to fill in any gaps in knowledge. Okay, but the key word in all of this is that they are human, and humans have all the complexities of being human. Sometimes we're sad, sometimes we're happy, sometimes we are attentive, and sometimes we're inattentive. We all make mistakes. The good part about a psychiatrist in general is that we've seen enough things where when we make our best guess, most times we're right. And when I say most times, I mean, I don't want to put a number on it. Let's just say most times we're right. Sometimes we're not right. And because every human that we interact with is so nuanced and so complicated, especially as you get older, ooh, y'all get real complicated as you get older. That's why I like working with kids. They're not that complicated. Yeah, kids are pretty straightforward, which makes my job really easy. So bring me your kids. Yay. Alrighty. Whereas for adults, especially young adults, because there's so many, it's like the overlap of independence plus and trying to figure out who you are in the universe and all the fun stuff that you want to do because now you're free and you have the rights of a full adult once you turn 18. All of those things can make life very, very complicated. And so imagine a psychiatrist who's a human person trying to work with a person who is very kind of complex and rich and robust in their life experience and their opinions and their thoughts. And sometimes the connections are really strong, and this one person trusts this other person, and it works really great. And the heavens open up, and the birds sing, and everything is magical. And most times that is what happens. But in the event that something happens where there's a mismatch, that is it's a thing and it is worth talking about. And so my first inclination and my first teaching pearl that I would give you or anybody who has a disagreement with a psychiatrist is to try to mention it to your psychiatrist. So in other words, if you're in there and you're like, ooh, I don't agree with this, I would encourage you to say, yeah, I don't know that I agree with you. And I've had people say that to me before. Now, as a psychiatrist, uh, theoretically, and this is where your mileage may vary, so take it with a grain of salt. Theoretically, the psychiatrist is trained to expect that at some point. And because we know that we're not always right. And so if someone says, I'm not really picking up what you're putting down, that makes me stop and say, tell me more. What's going on? Walk me through. Am I not explaining it correctly? Do you just not agree? Walk me through that. And I've had patients say, I don't agree with your diagnosis. I don't agree with your treatment plan. I don't agree with the way that you conceptualized what's going on. And then my response, if and me or whoever the psychiatrist is, should be, well, walk me through what your expectations are. Tell me more about what you thought was going to happen. Tell me more about your experience. Tell me more about what you've read or what you've heard from other people. Because people, patients and clients come into the office with a certain expectation. They will oftentimes come into the office with information because the internet is vast and can teach you and tell you all sorts of stuff. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing those concerns. So most times asking about it is the best way to address those concerns. Did you read something? Did you see something? Tell me more about this, right? And let the person talk. If then the psychiatrist feels that the not only is the expectation not being met, but if there's some type of miscommunication, misinformation, disinformation, clarifying those things with what we do know. And keep in mind, again, in psychiatry, there's a lot that we don't know because the brain is so complex, but we try to do the best we can. And in doing so, you need to mention what we don't know. We don't know how a thought turns into an action. We don't. I mean, you think, hey, I'm really mad. I want to punch this wall. How does a thought, the act of thinking, turn into an active movement? Don't punch the wall. That's a bad idea. Probably a bad example, but don't punch the wall. It doesn't end well. And so we don't know those certain nuances. Yes, I do have techniques and I do have medications that make those things less likely, but we don't have all the answers. And so trying to sit with that person and tease apart, hey, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here's how I handle this. Here's what typically happens. Because again, as psychiatrists, we are trained to see patterns. We learn patterns. It doesn't mean that there aren't outliers, right? So if you go through all of those things and there's still a miscommunication or a missed expectation or misaligned expectation, then that's where I would say it's really, really helpful to get that second opinion. And so second opinions are fun because especially for both people, for the psychiatrist and also the patient client. Number one, the patient client gets to experience another conceptualization of whatever is going on, because all psychiatrists are not trained the same way. And so having someone else listen and filter and put things together and then give you, hey, this is what I think is going on, is really, really helpful. It's also helpful for the psychiatrist, the original psychiatrist, because they may or may be missing something. And this is their opportunity to have some time to go and research some stuff. If there is a connection between the two psychiatrists. So in other words, if the second opinion psychiatrist is able to talk to the first opinion psychiatrist, some really good learning and collegial information exchange happens there. So in other words, there is a lot of actual really good stuff that comes out of you disagreeing with your psychiatrist. Here's the bitter pill, though. Here's the medicine that you have to swallow. I think there's a song about bitter pills and that sort of thing, which is if you get a second opinion and it falls in line with the first opinion, and especially if those two psychiatrists didn't talk to each other, but they are basically in the general same ballpark, then there's a really good chance that's probably what the issue is, right? So if the first psychiatrist says, you know what, I think you're depressed, and the second psychiatrist says, you know what, I think you're depressed, there's probably a really good chance that you're depressed. And I see this a lot of times in making the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, because it's still very misunderstood and not well incorporated into our society and that sort of thing. And so sometimes I'll get patients and parents who come in and they say, I think, I went and saw X, Y, and Z. They mentioned, these other licensed physicians or clinicians, and they mentioned that I think there may be some autism spectrum concerns going on. Can we have a second opinion? Sure. I run through my whole checklist. I do everything. I come to them and I go, yeah, so I actually think they were correct. And most people go, okay, I believe you. I trust you. How do we manage this? But I have had some folks who say, I still don't, I just don't see it. In which case it makes it really tough, but it feels like my job then is to go into the first do no harm mode. And so if you disagree with your psychiatrist, that's okay. Your psychiatrist is still obligated to not hurt you. And so most psychiatrists will then switch over into the, hey, we may not agree, but how can I help alleviate any suffering? How can I help validate you as best as I can? How can I help you get resources that could be helpful so that you don't drop out of the mental health network completely? We want to try to be a big help to you as best as we can. And so it's not easy. It's not a very comfortable conversation, but we always want to do our best to, first do no harm. People should leave our presence feeling as if they aren't worse off. Hopefully they will leave our presence as psychiatrists feeling hopeful that there's something that can be done. and that there's a next move or a next thing. And I just put to you, if you're seeing a psychiatrist or a therapist and you disagree with something, speak up. Some some people say, "Well, I just won't go back," and I'm like, "Yeah, you could do that." But if you don't go back, like if you go home and you read on the internet or something comes up and you're like, "Well, I don't know about this medicine," or I don't think he or she really listened to me. I don't think they grasped my situation. Not going back actually, it's a missed opportunity, y'all. I being able to go back and say, let me tell you more about the situation is so helpful. I find I find it also really helpful in situations of divorce or couples, right? So if you're working with one person in the couple and you get that whole perspective, and you make a decision, hey, this is what we need to work on. Sometimes it's actually helpful if the one half of the couple brings the other person in the couple, so that then you get a different perspective and it makes for a more well-rounded therapeutic experience. So yeah, so to make a long story short, there are lots of opportunities for growth for both your psychiatrist and you as a patient or client. The key is to keep the lines of communication open, to lean in, as they say, to those uncomfortable times, and to really make sure that you're putting yourself in the driver's seat. The years of paternalistic medicine are over. Paternalism is where the doctor just tells you what to do and you do it. Y'all, that don't work anymore. I haven't seen that stuff work in years, especially not in psychiatry. There was a big kind of shift in the cultural expectations, and that stuff has not happened in a long time. And so our goal as psychiatrists is to walk with you, not to tell you what to do. We are advisors and consultants and supporters, but we are not the arbiters of your experience here on earth. That is your privilege, is to run your life and do what you need to do, and our privilege is to help you along the way. So in conclusion, yes, if you disagree with your psychiatrist, speak up, speak out. We are here to help. We are not here to hurt. And I hope that will reassure you and everybody around you that we are physicians that are knowledgeable on mental health concerns. And if we can't do it, then we can help you find somebody who can.